So I think in L&D, there's specifically L&D. Now, just to round that off a little bit, I think organizational development is a department that used to exist. Don't know if it still exists. It's probably called something else now. Human capital management more generally. I think the role of that function, the people function, and the role of IT functions, when we have multi-agent frameworks and we have human hierarchies and those things need to work together, I think that's a strategic discussion. That's a strategic function that needs to architect the future of a business.
Mm-hmm.
And then the skill sets that are needed by the people that are left, somebody needs to deal with those things.
Yeah.
And how do we deal with that? And I think even things like skills versus activities versus competencies versus proficiency versus tasks, even that kind of taxonomy is not helpful for people who are outside of L&D, because L&D folks will talk about this stuff as if it's gold, and it doesn't mean anything to most people. So how do we create value in a business? That's a tricky old discussion. But I think, yes, how should people be using AI? And it's not one person goes to ChatGPT and asks for an output, and we depend entirely on their prompting ability. Personally, I run a business. You run a business, right? I don't know about you, but I don't have a learning department. I don't need one.
Nor a marketing department, and you don't need one of those either. Probably, maybe you would in the future. But to your point about the prompting side of things, looking at the Don Taylor and Egley Viniscate's data, and supported by other data that I've seen, suggests that most use cases, particularly in L&D, are individuals who L&D professionals that have mastered prompting and, know their supergroks and their GPT-5s, and the different benefits of each, and they might choose Perplexity for one and Midjourney for something. If they're operating at that level, they're the use case. Are you seeing, as in their productivity bump, if you like, are you seeing more at the group departmental level with the work that you do, Ash?
So honestly, a lot of what I do isn't really in the learning space.
Yeah.
It's across businesses, across nearly every vertical that you would expect businesses to have.
Yeah.
And the use of AI more broadly is in businesses that are doing this well. It's not one person with one, let's call it an application, because it's a SaaS application, right? Whether it's Claude or whether it's a ChatGPT or whether it's something else. Where people are doing this well, I'm doing this myself in my business, AI first business, because I can, because it's a business that's less than 3 years old, or about 3 years old. What I'm doing is I have multiple workflows. Each workflow has fully architected agents, model choice, agent choice is optimized for the thing that it needs to be done. Workflows have assistants in them. Every assistant has a knowledge base. So I've given the example a couple of times in the past that, a learning department in a box. You could have a lot of people who are fairly pious about the existence of designers and instructional writing and things like that. It's a rule base, right? And because it's a rule base, it's an algorithm. Anybody remember this book? If you're watching, you remember this one? This is like the Bible for e-learning developers, right? It's a bunch of rules. If it's a bunch of rules, you can stick it into a knowledge base. You can tell a bunch of assistants to go and operate against that knowledge base. What are they going to do? They're going to read the rules and they're going to do exactly what the rules say every single time in a standardized way. If you've got a workflow that has 20 of those doing different, producing standardized output linked to a bunch of media creation tools, one person might oversee that, or part of an FTE might oversee that. But really, that's such an accelerant compared to one person using ChatGPT. So it's really the workflow, the agentic workflow space where there is most traction. But agentic workflows are fine. You need agents, workflows, and one more thing to do this well. And that other thing is the ability to retrieve your own data. The thing that makes your company special needs to be vectorized and retrievable in a workflow. And if you're doing these three things and you've got your data in order and you're able to retrieve it and you're able to parse it through agentic workflows, then the difference between that and one person using ChatGPT is just phenomenal. It's ridiculous.
So to take the learning space, because that's the only space that I know anything about, agentic workflows, and for example, in content creation, you just made drawn a good analogy. It's probably unlikely to be a learning professional, other than maybe a select few that would have got into it at this depth. So who will be making decisions about the creation of agentic workflows for things like learning and development, typically, if it's not going to be learning and development people, in your experience?
So learning and development folks have a role to play because they know what their workflows are. They know what their processes are. They know how they can be optimized. They know where the pitfalls will be. They know where agents will fall over and you need human oversight. So there is value in that, but it requires the skill set to be able to work with data and be able to work with agents. The architecting of these things, of course, is going to be technical. It's going to be IT teams or vendors who are going to do this. So the L&D folks, back to, what you do for a living, the L&D folks in the market who want to thrive are going to need skills around data and around, technical skills if they're going to thrive in that space, or they're going to need to make a choice. And I've seen many people in the market make the choice. You're watching. Yes, I'm talking about you. It's the choice is, I don't understand technology. I don't understand data. So I'm going to go and be a coach. Great. Market's flooded with coaches. There's no barrier to entry with coaches. You can just, let me just become a coach in front of your very eyes. You ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm a coach. Done. That's kind of all you need. So the barrier to entry is low.
And a qualification, Ashwin, from coaching hours. But
nope.
But I know what
you don't need a qualification. It's desirable. You might rise above the rest, but you don't actually need one.
Fair point.
So that's my point. So the people side of things, if you're not good at tech and data, then of course the people side of things is important, and it's important to get that right as well. So I'm being a little flippant about it, but these are really the skills of the future, these 3 areas. And how much are you seeing in the market, in the jobs that are coming forth from businesses around these 3 areas of skill?
Very little, very, very little. And actually, I think what we're seeing at the moment is, I think we're in a hiatus period. I think so. So jobs come about from 3 different angles. Someone leaves, and so it's a backfill of that role. So it's a duplication of a pre-existing job description that might have AI written on it as well. AI first, whatever that means, or just AI somewhere, just to give it a bit of zhuzh. Or it's through some kind of transformation. There's a big transformation, an HR transformation or a technology transformation, creating a new job. We're seeing a lot less of that than I would have hoped to see. So I think that's why I say we're in a bit of a hiatus. The other is that you've got immediacy of projects or programs that are already underway, and you just need resource. And so there's an increase in fixed term contracting. So PAYE hiring, but with an end date, because it's to get this over the line. And you would hope maybe contracting, but we haven't necessarily seen those numbers increasing either. So I think we're at that point where the number of jobs that are being created, new jobs that are being created, is very, very low. The number of jobs that are out there at the moment is extremely low, and the number of job seekers that are out there that are qualified is very high. And that's the polar opposite of what we saw in 2022. So until there's new jobs being created, like literally being created, we're probably going to see this imbalance continue. The severity might change, and hopefully it does. I'm a recruiter, right? I want it to. But until we see those new jobs released, defined, designed, then we're not going to know what the kind of accelerant is going to be. And I just don't think there are some jobs in the US that you're starting to see coming through, but these are highly AI specialist or highly AI linked. And that's probably not what we're going to see generally in learning and development. I'm excited to see what it does look like, but I think it's definitely going to involve having data literacy skills and an understanding of agentic workflow, an understanding of AI, because I can't see how it can't. If that's going to affect workers in all the other jobs in an organization, how can L&D not be masters of knowledge level? How could you performance consult around something that affects other jobs that you're responsible for training if you don't have that knowledge? So I would expect that to be a kind of standard norm. Would you agree, Ash?
Yeah, I think that these areas need to surface into new roles, and we don't know what those new roles are going to look like, but I'm not seeing a lot of that. I mean, let's be honest, I'm not really looking at the job market at all. I've got my own company, I'm busy, but I haven't really seen that many AI focused roles that are transformative. It's mostly iterative on what happened in the past plus a little bit of AI. And I guess the interesting thing for me is that I've got a few friends who are in this unfortunate position where they've been looking for jobs. They've been trying to find a good fit for quite a while. The salary perspective. So if you've got senior folks who used to be looking at, jobs 100, 120, 150K, leadership roles that are few and far between, and there's lots of competition in this space. At the same time, we always have this in the market where you can be in-house, you can be consulting, you can be vendor side, right?
Yeah.
Basically, you have that split. And one, we have the issue of salaries. So what used to be a 100K position is now probably a 60K position. I'm just guessing. I'll ask you in a second. And the other side of it is the vendor side is also drying up, because if you think about, I'll give you the example of e-learning vendors. You might have the old workflow. A stakeholder goes to a learning department, says, make me some e-learning from my PowerPoint. The learning department doesn't do that. They just offshore it to a vendor and say, make me the e-learning at a lower price point. They do the thing, they come back, and you get this kind of back and forth bounce. Now, learning departments are fearful of their roles being cut, so they're going to pull some of that stuff back. They're going to try and do it in-house. You now have jobs on the vendor side, which are going to decrease. Budgets are tight and all of these things. So you've got this kind of weird mix in the market. Salaries and a lack of jobs compounding each other, these two things. How are you seeing the salary thing play out?
I look at it through I guess a macroeconomic lens, right? So if you look at data, ONS data, for example, salaries aren't decreasing. We're not seeing huge wage deflation. We're seeing wage inflation, but just not at the right level. Well, that can't be measured if a job is, if someone is let go from a role and a new role is created, and that new role is 70% salary of the previous role, that doesn't mean it's been deflated. It means a new role's been created. It's at different salary levels. Those numbers wouldn't correlate. There is definitely, salaries are massively under pressure. So if a company is hiring for a new role or for a role, the salary expectations at an organizational level are significantly lower than they were a couple of years ago, anecdotally. And that can be incredibly shocking, especially when you look at a job description and actually it reads pretty much the same as every other learning and development job description, with the only nuance being which sector. So it's very, very hard to do. We've benchmarked, the first time we've actually been literally able to benchmark L&D salaries, we've only been able to do because of AI, because we were able to use an AI tool to create the fuzzy logic to be able to lump together this multitude of job roles and be able to push them all together and then create the median and the 25th and 75th percentile. That wasn't possible. I'm sure it would have been possible, but it would have cost me a fortune to have an external do that for me. But I can do that with 1,000 data points in it and something like, Grok or whatever tool I'm using. But what it doesn't tell us is what impact has been had over time on salaries for particular job roles, because we haven't got the timeline for it. But anecdotally, I would say that salaries are increasingly lower for a skill set that would have been requiring a premium 2 years ago. But I'm not sure that's just an L&D. I think that's possibly just a symptom of the wider jobs market. We've got less vacancies in the UK. Well, we've got about at the end of July 2025, ONS tells us 725,000 open vacancies in the UK, 33.9 million people employed. The number and the rate at which that's going down month on month is alarming. It's alarming to the UK government and to anyone that looks at it. But the parallels that I tried to draw in an article which we've put together, which I know I've sent over to you, Ash, will put on our website, essentially that we're not too far off 2008 levels, because we had 650,000 jobs available in the market. We had much higher unemployment. But what we're able to do now by being able to use tools like AI to help us with data is to kind of look at subsets. And I think in L&D, probably not massively far off, quite literally where we were in 2008. And for those of us that remember 2008, it wasn't fun. And I think we're feeling a little bit of that at the moment in some quarters, Ash. Maybe not in the amazing world of agentic AI, which you're obviously riding the wave of, but maybe in other quarters of the economy, right?